Zoe stood at the door, her small hands gripping the edges tightly. "Don't leave me alone with my brother," she said urgently, her voice trembling. Emma paused, feeling a cold shiver run down her spine. She had never heard Zoe speak like this before. Emma had always trusted that Zoe and Ryan, her brother, were fine when she was gone, but now something felt different. Zoe's eyes were wide, filled with a fear Emma couldn't ignore. Emma knelt down, trying to stay calm. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" she asked gently, brushing Zoe's hair back from her face. But Zoe didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, her little fingers twisting nervously in her sleeves. Emma's mind raced. Was Zoe just being dramatic? Or was there something more? Ryan had always been a little difficult, but Emma never thought it would affect Zoe like this. She tried to reassure her daughter. "I'll only be gone for a few hours. Everything will be okay. I'll call you during lunch, okay?" But Zoe just nodded quietly, her fear still visible. Emma kissed her forehead and reluctantly left for work, but she couldn't shake the unease in her heart. Something wasn't right, and Emma felt she needed to find out what. As Emma drove away from the house, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. Zoe's words kept echoing in her mind. "Don't leave me alone with my brother." Emma had always trusted her children to be safe and well-behaved, but today something felt off. Zoe had never been this scared about staying with Ryan before. Emma had to know what was really going on. She made a quick decision. Instead of heading straight to work, she turned around and parked down the street, out of sight from the house. Her heart was racing as she watched the front door from a distance. Emma felt guilty, like she was betraying Zoe's trust, but she knew she couldn't ignore the warning signs. Zoe's fear was real, and Emma needed to understand why. As she sat in the car, Emma thought about Ryan. He was a good kid, but lately he had become more withdrawn and obsessive. She couldn't help but wonder if something had changed between him and Zoe. Maybe it wasn't just that she didn't want to be alone with him. Maybe Zoe was scared of him. Emma's stomach twisted as she thought about all the times she had brushed off little signs of tension between the siblings. Minutes later, Emma carefully walked back to the house and found a spot where she could peek through the window without being seen. She was determined to find out what happened when she wasn't around. She had to make sure her children were safe. Emma's instincts were screaming at her that Zoe's behavior was a cry for help, and Emma wasn't going to ignore it any longer. From her hidden spot behind the bushes, Emma watched her daughter Zoe through the living room window. The house was eerily quiet, and the usual sounds of playing or chatting were missing. Instead, Zoe sat motionless at the kitchen table, her little hands resting on her lunchbox. Emma's heart tightened as she watched Zoe trace the same pattern over and over again. The small girl's fingers moved slowly in perfect circles, drawing the same shapes in the air, her gaze locked on the lunchbox in front of her. It wasn't the first time Emma had noticed Zoe's odd behavior, but it was the first time she saw her daughter so still, so focused, and so lost in her own world. Zoe's movements were robotic, like she wasn't even aware of the world around her. The more Emma watched, the more disturbed she became. Zoe had always been an energetic child, full of curiosity and life, but today she seemed completely disconnected. Her fingers moved with precision, tracing circles, without looking at anything other than the lunchbox. Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. This behavior reminded her of Ryan, Zoe's older brother. Ryan had always been a bit obsessive about things, especially when it came to order and control. He liked things to be just right, everything in its place. At first, Emma had brushed it off as harmless quirks, but now she wasn't so sure. Was Zoe starting to copy Ryan's habits, or was something more troubling going on? As Emma watched, Zoe's fingers continued to trace the patterns, never stopping. The circles grew larger and larger as Zoe's concentration deepened. Emma felt a pang of fear in her chest. She knew something wasn't right, She had seen Ryan's obsessive behaviors before, but this was different. Zoe's actions weren't just a sign of boredom or play, they seemed to be driven by a deeper, more anxious need. Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she realized that Zoe's strange behavior might not just be a phase, it could be a result of something far more troubling. Emma shifted her weight, careful not to make a sound, but her mind was spinning. What had happened to make Zoe so anxious? Why was she repeating this pattern over and over again, like she was trying to control her world or escape from it? Emma knew she had to keep watching to understand what was really going on between her children. Zoe's eyes were blank, staring at the lunchbox as her hand continued to move, drawing the same circles. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that this wasn't normal behavior for a 7-year-old. Children had a natural need to explore, to play, to express themselves, but Zoe wasn't doing any of that. She was completely still, completely focused, like she was trapped in a routine that she couldn't escape from. Emma swallowed hard. Could this be the result of something happening between Zoe and Ryan? Was Ryan's need for control affecting his sister in ways Emma hadn't even imagined? The more she watched, the more her gut told her that Zoe wasn't just copying Ryan's tendencies. She was being influenced by them in ways that were both unhealthy and dangerous. The realization hit Emma like a wave. Zoe was scared, trapped in a cycle of behavior that wasn't hers, but was being forced upon her. Emma knew then that she had to act fast. She couldn't wait any longer. Whatever was happening in their home, it was worse than she thought, and Zoe needed her mother's protection now more than ever. Zoe's voice trembled as she began to speak, her small hands twisting together nervously. Emma had been asking her daughter what was going on, but Zoe had remained quiet, unwilling to share much. Now sitting on the couch with her mother, Zoe looked down at her lap, as if trying to find the right words. Emma's heart was heavy with concern as she gently encouraged her daughter to talk. "Mom," Zoe finally whispered, "Ryan, he's been doing something strange." Emma leaned in closer, her breath catching in her throat. She had feared that Zoe might be hiding something, but hearing her daughter speak of Ryan made Emma's stomach twist with anxiety. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Emma asked softly, trying to keep her voice calm despite the rush of emotions flooding her mind. Zoe hesitated for a moment before she looked up, her eyes wide with worry. "Ryan has a special room," Zoe said quietly. "He calls it his evidence room. It's full of pictures and papers, all about you and me." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of pictures and papers, Zoe?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zoe bit her lip, thinking for a moment before answering. "Photos of you, Mom," Zoe said, her voice shaking. "And me too. He has pictures of everything we do, even when you're not home. He says he's documenting us. He has papers with notes on everything. He says it's to help him keep track of us." Emma's chest tightened, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. Ryan had always been a bit too obsessed with control, but this sounded much worse than anything Emma had imagined. She had never known that Ryan was secretly keeping such a room, or that he was so focused on documenting every detail of their lives. "Does he make you help him with this?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. Zoe nodded. "Yes, Mom. He asked me to help him organize it. He says it's important, like a big project. He says we have to keep everything in order, or things will go wrong." Emma's thoughts raced. Ryan's behavior had always been a little unusual, but this was on a whole new level. She had always thought his obsessive tendencies were harmless, but now it seemed like they were spiraling out of control. Zoe's voice quivered as she continued. "He makes me write things down too, like what happens every day, when you're late, when I do something wrong. He wants to keep track of everything." Zoe's eyes filled with fear as she looked up at her mother. "Mom, it's like he's watching us all the time. He won't stop." Emma's heart ached as she realized just how deeply Ryan's behavior was affecting Zoe. She had known that Ryan was becoming more isolated, but she had never imagined that he was controlling his sister this way, using fear and manipulation to make Zoe comply with his strange obsession. Emma took Zoe's hand in hers, her grip firm but gentle. "I'm so sorry, Zoe," Emma said, her voice breaking. "You shouldn't have to go through this. I promise, I'll make sure this stops." Zoe nodded, her small face full of worry. Emma knew that she had to act quickly. Ryan's obsessive behavior had gone too far, and it was time for her to step in and protect Zoe from the dangerous patterns Ryan was creating. Emma's mind raced with plans, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let her children live under this kind of control any longer. Emma's mind raced as she sat on the couch with Zoe, absorbing everything her daughter had just revealed. Ryan's obsessive behavior had crossed a dangerous line. The evidence room, the pictures, the notes, everything pointed to one thing. Ryan's need to control was escalating. Emma had to act fast to protect Zoe. There was no time to waste. "Zoe," Emma said gently, "we're going to do something, okay? We need to get away from Ryan for a while, but we need to be very careful." Zoe looked up at her mother, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What do we have to do, Mom?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had to come up with a plan that would get Zoe out of the house without raising suspicion. "We're going to pretend you're sick, okay? I'll send a picture to Ryan saying you're not feeling well and that we're going to urgent care. That way he'll think we're busy and won't question us." Zoe nodded, still unsure of the plan, but trusting her mother. "But what if Ryan doesn't believe us?" Emma smiled reassuringly, though inside she was worried. She knew Ryan was becoming more controlling and that he would demand proof. "Don't worry, sweetie. I'll make sure he believes it." Emma grabbed her phone and quickly took a picture of Zoe looking pale and tired, sitting on the couch with her hands curled into her lap. Zoe tried her best to look unwell, even though she was still scared. Emma took the photo carefully, making sure it looked convincing. She didn't want to raise any suspicion. After snapping the picture, Emma typed a quick message to Ryan. "Zoe's not feeling well. She has a fever. I'm taking her to urgent care just to be safe. I'll keep you updated." She pressed send and waited. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at her phone, praying that Ryan wouldn't ask too many questions. Almost immediately, Ryan's reply came through. "What's her temperature? Which urgent care? I need to see proof." Emma's stomach dropped. Ryan wasn't going to let it go that easily. She knew this wouldn't be simple, and now she had to think on her feet. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, trying to figure out what to do next. She couldn't afford to slip up now. Taking a deep breath, Emma typed back, "Her temperature is 101 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm taking her to St. Mark's Urgent Care. I'll send you a picture of the waiting room when we get there." Ryan's reply was immediate. "I want the exact time of arrival, and I expect an update every hour. Don't forget the picture." Emma's hands shook as she read the message. She knew she was running out of time. Ryan's control was suffocating, and every move she made had to be perfect. She had to get Zoe out of the house, away from Ryan's influence, and fast. "Zoe," Emma said softly, trying to keep her voice steady, "we're going to go now, but I need you to trust me, okay? We're going to stay safe, and we'll figure this out together." Zoe nodded, but Emma could see the fear still in her eyes. They both knew the situation was serious. Emma had to act fast, keep up the lie, and find a way to break free from Ryan's grip on their lives. This was only the beginning. Emma was prepared to do whatever it took to protect her daughter. Emma's mind was racing. She had promised herself that she would protect Zoe at all costs, and now she realized that it was time to take things a step further. Ryan's obsession had gone too far, and she needed evidence, hard proof, of what was really happening. She couldn't let him keep controlling Zoe like this. As soon as she got home, Emma went straight to work. She had learned enough to know that Ryan was meticulous, always watching and documenting every little thing. She couldn't rely on just watching through the windows anymore. She needed to get more information. She needed to catch him in the act, so there would be no doubt about what was happening. Emma went to her bedroom and pulled out a small bag that she kept hidden in the back of her closet. Inside, there were cameras and recording devices, things she had never thought she would use in her own home. But this wasn't just about a privacy issue. This was about keeping Zoe safe. She started by placing a small, discreet camera in the living room. It was hidden on a shelf, with a perfect view of the main area where most of the action happened. She adjusted it carefully, making sure it wouldn't be noticed. Next, Emma placed another camera in the hallway, where Zoe often passed by on her way to her room. She made sure it was positioned so she could see who was coming and going. After that, Emma set up a recording device in the kitchen near the table where Zoe had been tracing patterns on her lunchbox. She wanted to capture any conversations or strange interactions that might happen when she wasn't around. The devices were small but powerful, and Emma knew they would do the job. As she stepped back to look at the rooms, Emma felt a wave of shock. She had never imagined she would have to resort to this. It felt like a betrayal, but she knew it was the only way. She had to understand what was going on behind closed doors. She had to protect Zoe from whatever Ryan was doing. Emma stood still for a moment, her eyes scanning the house. It was surreal. Her own home had become a place of constant surveillance. She was in the middle of a complex and dangerous game that Ryan had created, a game she had never expected to be part of. Her heart ached for Zoe, who was trapped in this web of control and manipulation. Every time Emma thought she understood the situation, she uncovered something more disturbing. Ryan's need for control wasn't just about keeping track of Zoe's actions. It was about breaking her down, piece by piece. Emma sat down at the kitchen table, trying to take a deep breath. As much as she hated what she was doing, she knew it was necessary. Ryan's obsession was deeper than she had realized, and it was taking a mental toll on Zoe. Emma had to find a way to stop it before it broke her daughter completely. With the cameras in place, Emma started to feel a little less helpless. She knew it would take time, but she had to start somewhere. Her eyes lingered on the small device she had hidden in the corner of the kitchen. This was her only chance to gather the evidence she needed to take action, and she wasn't going to stop until she had everything she needed to free Zoe from Ryan's grip. Ryan's behavior had started to spiral out of control. Emma could feel it in the tension that hung in the air every time she spoke to him or checked her phone. What had once been an obsessive need to monitor Zoe's actions had now turned into a desperate, almost frantic attempt to control everything in their lives. Emma's heart raced as she read through the constant barrage of messages from Ryan, each one more demanding than the last. "Where are you? Why hasn't Zoe checked in yet? She's not answering her phone. I need an update." The messages were relentless. It was as if Ryan was watching their every move, unable to tolerate even the slightest change in his carefully controlled routine. Emma had tried to keep her cool, replying with calm, neutral answers, but inside she was starting to panic. She knew she couldn't keep this up for long without something breaking. Ryan's obsession was growing, and Emma was running out of time to protect Zoe. She had already set up the hidden cameras and recording devices, but now she had to be more careful. Every conversation with Ryan felt like a minefield. He was checking in with her constantly, asking questions about Zoe's whereabouts, what she was doing, and why she hadn't responded to his messages immediately. The more Emma responded, the more Ryan pushed, asking for proof and demanding details. He wanted pictures of Zoe, updates every hour, and even when she was supposed to be asleep. Did Zoe eat dinner yet? Was she late for bed? I need to know everything. Emma's stomach turned every time she saw another message from him. She couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. It was clear now. Ryan wasn't just obsessing over Zoe's actions. He was trying to control her every move, and Emma could see how this was affecting her daughter. Zoe had started to withdraw even more, her anxiety growing, her behaviors becoming more rigid and obsessive. It was like a web closing in on them both, and Emma couldn't just stand by and watch it get worse. She knew she had to gather all the evidence she could before taking the next step. Every text, every phone call, every piece of information could be used to show how deeply Ryan's control had taken root. She had to be prepared for what was coming. You didn't answer my question. Is Zoe feeling all right? I need confirmation. You promised me you'd keep me updated. Ryan's messages grew more demanding, and Emma felt the pressure building. He was no longer just asking. He was ordering her to comply. Emma could see his control slipping into paranoia. He was checking up on Zoe in every way he could, from messages to tracking her movements with his own devices, trying to find out if she was lying or hiding something from him. Emma felt the urgency rise within her. She was on the edge, knowing that this couldn't go on much longer without something breaking. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep this up. But one thing was clear: Ryan's behavior had crossed a line. He wasn't just controlling, he was breaking down Zoe's sense of self. With everything she had gathered, Emma knew she was preparing for something huge. She was going to have to face Ryan in court, but first she needed to make sure that she had enough proof to take action. She gathered all the evidence, the messages, the recordings, the pictures of Zoe, and started organizing them. Emma couldn't back down now. She had to protect her daughter, and the truth had to come out. Emma sat at her kitchen table, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. She had watched Ryan's obsession with Zoe grow, seen how it had taken a toll on her daughter's mental health. Now, after collecting all the evidence, the messages, the recordings, the hidden cameras, it was clear that Ryan's behavior was beyond just controlling. It was emotionally abusive, and Emma couldn't let it go on any longer. She had to act. She called a lawyer, someone she trusted, who specialized in family law and custody cases. Emma knew this wasn't going to be easy. Ryan had always been manipulative, and he would fight back. But Emma was prepared. She couldn't let her fear stop her from protecting Zoe. Sitting in her living room later that afternoon, Emma sorted through the pile of evidence. She had collected everything she could: texts, recordings, photos, and even the strange charts and notes Ryan had been keeping on Zoe. The lawyer had told her that it would be crucial to show how Ryan's obsession was affecting Zoe's well-being. She was determined to make sure that Zoe's voice was heard in all of this. Zoe sat quietly next to her, her eyes downcast. Emma knew she was still processing everything that had happened, still trying to understand what had been happening to her. But Emma also knew that Zoe had seen too much of Ryan's manipulation to ignore it any longer. "Sweetheart," Emma said softly, her voice filled with tenderness, "I need you to help me with something. I need you to tell me everything you remember about the charts and notes Ryan has been keeping. Everything." Zoe looked up at her mother, her face filled with fear. "I don't want to talk about it," Zoe whispered, her voice shaky. She looked like she was about to cry, and Emma could feel her heart breaking. But Emma knew this was the only way to stop Ryan, to put an end to the control he had over them both. "It's okay, Zoe," Emma reassured her gently, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I'm not asking you to do this alone. We're going to take all of this to the lawyer, and we're going to make sure Ryan can't hurt you anymore. You're safe now." Zoe hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "He keeps charts on everything we do," she said in a soft voice. "He writes down the time you're late, or when I do something wrong. He says it's important to keep track of everything." Zoe looked up at Emma, her eyes full of confusion and fear. "He has this big notebook with all these notes, and sometimes he makes me help him organize them." Emma felt a sick feeling in her stomach as Zoe continued. "He keeps track of all the mistakes we make. Like, he has a chart for when you talk to other people or when I'm not in bed on time. He says it's all part of his plan. Zoe paused, tears starting to form in her eyes. He says if we don't follow the plan, everything will fall apart. Emma squeezed her daughter's hand tightly, fighting back tears. She had known Ryan was controlling, but hearing all of this made it even worse than she could have imagined. Zoe's voice quivered as she added, "He even has a chart for how often we're late or when we forget things. He says it's proof that something's wrong." Emma knew she had everything she needed. The charts, the notes, the messages, they were all part of Ryan's twisted control. Emma was going to take it all to court. She was going to fight for Zoe, for her safety, and for their future. With the evidence in hand, Emma made a silent promise to herself. She would do whatever it took to protect her daughter from Ryan's hold. The legal battle was about to begin, but Emma was ready to face it head-on. The courtroom was quiet, except for the sound of papers shuffling and the soft hum of the air conditioning. Emma sat at the table next to her lawyer, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment she had to show the court everything Ryan had done to control and manipulate Zoe. She looked over at Zoe, who sat beside her, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Emma could see the fear in her daughter's eyes, but she also saw a glimmer of hope. They were finally going to end the control Ryan had over them. Ryan sat across from them, his face tense, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for a way out. Emma couldn't help but notice how different he looked now. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that only made his behavior seem more desperate. The judge called the session to order, and Emma's lawyer stood up to speak. He began by presenting the evidence, text messages, photographs, and recordings that showed how Ryan had been obsessively monitoring and documenting Zoe's every move. Emma's stomach twisted as the lawyer explained how Ryan had created charts and notebooks full of Zoe's supposed mistakes and inconsistencies, tracking every part of her life like a project. He laid out how Ryan had made Zoe feel watched and controlled, even in the most personal moments. When it was Zoe's turn to testify, Emma could see how hard it was for her. But Zoe was brave. She spoke clearly, her voice shaking but strong, as she described what Ryan had done. She explained how Ryan had kept track of everything, how often Emma was late, what Zoe ate, who she talked to, and even what time she went to bed. Zoe spoke about the charts, the photographs, and how Ryan would make her help him organize them. "He says it's important to keep track of everything," Zoe said, her eyes downcast. "He says it's for the plan, but sometimes it feels like he's watching everything I do. I don't feel free anymore." Emma felt her heart ache for her daughter. This wasn't the little girl she had raised. Ryan's control had changed her, and it broke Emma to hear her daughter speak about it so openly. But Zoe was finally standing up for herself. Emma was proud of her. When it was Ryan's turn to speak, he immediately tried to defend himself. He started talking about how he was just trying to help Zoe, how everything he did was for her well-being. He said he was concerned about her safety and needed to document things to keep track of her health and her behavior. But the more he spoke, the more desperate he sounded. He even tried to present his own charts and photos as evidence, claiming they proved he was only being a responsible brother. But it all backfired. The judge, the lawyer, and everyone in the room could see it. Ryan's obsessive behavior wasn't about caring for Zoe. It was about control. His need to document every part of Zoe's life, his insistence on tracking every detail, showed just how far he had crossed the line into psychological abuse. The more Ryan tried to explain, the clearer it became that his actions were manipulative, not protective. In the end, the judge ruled in Emma's favor. Ryan's visitation rights were suspended, and he was ordered to seek therapy. Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The fight wasn't over, but it was a victory, a step toward healing for Zoe and for herself. As they left the courtroom, Zoe took Emma's hand. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt a sense of peace. Ryan had lost control, and they were finally free. The moment the judge made the ruling, Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had been holding her breath for so long, waiting for this day to come, and now it was finally over. The judge had ruled in her favor. Ryan's visitation rights were suspended, and he was ordered to seek psychological treatment. It was a huge relief, but at the same time, Emma knew their journey wasn't over. This was just the beginning of the healing process for both her and Zoe. As they walked out of the courtroom, Zoe squeezed Emma's hand tightly. Emma looked down at her daughter, seeing the small smile on Zoe's face for the first time in months. Zoe had been through so much, and Emma was determined to help her heal. The battle was over, but the real work, helping Zoe find peace again, was just starting. In the months that followed, Emma and Zoe focused on rebuilding their lives. Ryan's influence no longer loomed over them, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from their home. They could finally breathe easy, without the constant fear of being watched or controlled. Zoe's behavior slowly began to change. She stopped obsessively organizing her things, and the constant need for order and perfection started to fade. She no longer traced the same patterns on her lunchbox or spent hours worrying about every small mistake. For the first time in a long while, Zoe started to relax. Emma enrolled Zoe in therapy, where she could talk about everything that had happened and work through her feelings in a safe environment. It wasn't an easy process, but with the support of her therapist and Emma's love, Zoe began to flourish. She started showing more interest in her hobbies again, drawing, reading, and even making new friends at school. The anxiety that had once gripped her began to ease, and Emma saw the old Zoe coming back, the carefree, creative girl she had always been. Zoe's transformation wasn't instant, and there were days when the shadows of the past would resurface. But Emma was there every step of the way, supporting her daughter and reminding her that she was safe now. They worked together, creating new routines, new memories, and rebuilding trust in each other. It was a slow but steady process, and each day brought them closer to the life they deserved. Ryan, on the other hand, continued his own journey in therapy, as ordered by the court. Emma had no idea what the future held for him, but for now she focused on her daughter's healing. Emma knew that the damage Ryan had caused wouldn't just disappear overnight, but she also knew that with time, love, and support, they could move forward. One evening, as Emma sat at the kitchen table watching Zoe do her homework, she couldn't help but smile. The room felt different now, lighter, happier, and full of hope. They had made it through the storm, and now they could look forward to brighter days ahead. Emma knew the road to healing wasn't easy, but with Zoe by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. They had both survived, and together they would thrive.